Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this, the fourth in our series of Working Lunch webinars. So this, as I said, is the fourth in a series of step-by-step processes from the date when you decide to change careers to actually starting that first day in your new job. We've looked at self-assessment. That's the who, the what, the why, the where, and when. We've investigated research and stressed the importance of networking. And last week, we looked at job applications and crafting a really compelling CV and cover letter. So your application has been accepted, great excitement, you've been invited for interview. And today we're going to look at interview preparation and practice. And to join me is experienced OA career consultant, Fiona Jackson. Fiona, welcome.
Oh, good afternoon and welcome, everybody.
Fiona, can I ask you just to give a few words about your background, please?
Yes, of course. I mean, I will have met some of you, or if not face-to-face, virtually. So some of you will know me, but I'm one of the career consultants at the Officers Association. My background was I did an 8-year short service commission in the Army, which was at the time in the Royal Army Educational Corps. But since then, I've worked mainly in HR roles. First of all, for John Lewis Partnership, doing recruiting, talent management, succession planning, learning and development. Since then, I've also worked in the third sector, not just for the Officers Association, but for the charity voluntary services overseas, where one of the roles I did was international recruitment. So I have got a good background in the whole area of getting a job and interviews and everything else. So hopefully I'll be able to help you with some tips today.
It's great to have you with us, Fiona. So today, what will we be covering? It's the different approaches between face-to-face and virtual interviews. Virtual interviews have virtually been what's been done over the last 15 or so months. Understanding the employer's perspective. Why is the employer interested in you? How you can pitch yourself when you do come to have that interview. Look at the questions you could ask and perhaps some that you shouldn't ask, and then find out how best to follow up after the interview. So Fiona, how should one approach one's interview?
Well, as you said, you're probably likely to be excited when you've got certainly your first interview, so that's great. But there are some things that you need to think about. And the first one will be to check, is it face-to-face or virtual? Over the last year, of course, almost all interviews were virtual. And some companies like Amazon and BT say they will carry on doing virtual interviews even after the that we have all the restrictions lifted from COVID. So just check that out. And sometimes organizations will do a telephone or online interview for the first one and then face-to-face for the second one. If it is a face-to-face interview, probably a statement of the blindingly obvious here, but do check out where the interview will be. So, will it be in a hotel? Will it be in the company's offices? And make sure that you plan your journey, check the route and car parking if you're going by car, and obviously train times and distance from the station. One thing I would say about being on time, make sure you do arrive on time, but not too early. It's rather embarrassing if for the interviewer, if the interviewee turns up, say, half an hour early, especially as there may be another interview going on at the time. So the good old 5 minutes early rule will stand you in good stead. But I'd say if you are very early, then the best thing to do is go and have a coffee very near to the venue where the interview is taking place. If it's virtual, then this is really imperative that you make sure that you have a quiet space with no interruptions. So you don't want dogs coming in and out of the room, children coming in and out of the room, and so on. Have a neutral background. You can actually blank out your background, or if you are at home and you want to have a background, to make sure it's neutral. The other thing is make sure all your technology is working. Again, a bit of a statement of the blindingly obvious, but make sure your internet connection is okay, your laptop or computer's working, and have a backup on your phone. And for those of you who've got families, and if you've got kids at home while the interview's going on, then make sure that they're not playing video games or something, because that will use up your bandwidth. So just make sure it's you and you alone using the internet at the time of the interview. People often ask about dress. Well, I would say dress for success. So be smart and businesslike, whatever the format. So even if it is a virtual interview, then put on the same clothes that you would wear for a face-to-face interview. And this includes your bottom half, even if the interview is virtual, just in case you have to stand up and then you're caught out because you're wearing your pajamas on the bottom, but you've got a collar and tie at the top. So yeah, so dress for success.
Would you, something that I've heard, Fiona, would you say that employers at interviews were quite tolerant of people having difficulties with the internet, perhaps a year or so ago when we first moved online and virtually, but they're a bit less tolerant now because we've had time to sort these problems out?
I would agree with you. I mean, early days, people were still getting to grips with Teams, Zoom, GoToMeeting, things like that, but we've all been doing it for over a year now, and yeah, it's not really excusable unless something drastic happens and you have a power cut. But yeah, you should be absolutely au fait with using the technology.
So we go to the next question about what the employers are really looking for. An employer is looking to recruit someone and interview people because they have a problem that they need to solve. So how do you identify what the employer is looking for?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Clive, because I think a lot of the clients that I see and talk to, they approach a job application and an interview around what it is they want from it. And actually, the employer is not as interested in what you want from the job. They're more interested, as you say, in you solving their problem. So it is vital that you do your research and prepare for the interview and very much understand what the employer is looking for. So one of the things you could be looking at is, what does the employer want in terms of the position? So are they recruiting to cover an existing role where somebody is leaving, or is this a new appointment? And if it is a new appointment, then they may not be 100% sure of what they're looking for, actually, but that's a good thing to find out. Also do your research in looking at what challenges does the organization face. So if it's a commercial company, what's the market like at the moment? Is it a very competitive market? Is it a rather moribund market? What's going on? And also look at things like lack of funding. So for example, if you would say going for an interview with an NHS trust, you might want to look at any of the challenges that NHS trusts have at the moment in terms of funding and other things like that. So that is really, really important. And I do remember a client saying to me that they went for an interview, actually it was with an NHS trust, and they kicked themselves because afterwards they realized they knew two people within the NHS trust, and they could have actually found out a lot more about the role and the trust beforehand. So make sure that you do your research. Look at what the organization's strategy is going forward. Read any articles in the business press, online, look at the company websites, and try and think about, this time from your point of view, how can you help them get there? What are the skills and the experience that you've got to help them meet their strategy going forward? And then think about the things that you could do to help address any current challenges that the organization has, and bring ideas and innovation for the future. And I'm not saying there that you should be openly critical of the organization, but you might want to say something along the lines of, I can see there's currently, you've got a new competitor in this market, and you'll be concerned about your market share, and this is the things that I could do to help develop that. Yeah, so it's really important.
Good, thank you. And how would you pitch yourself when you get to interview? I know there's a difference here between virtual interviews and face-to-face, but what advice would you give someone going to interview?
Yeah, I think actually you need to think about that, whether it is a virtual interview or a face-to-face interview, and think about how you will come across and what impression that you'd like to make with the interviewer. And people will judge. I mean, it's in our nature to judge. So, for example, I remember interviewing somebody who was ex-military, turned up in the sort of full pinstripe suit, regimental cufflinks, tie, braces, etc. But actually, for the fit of the organisation, that probably wasn't the best thing to do. And actually, other people formed an impression of that person. So, just think about how you come across. Also, don't appear too needy or over eager. In fact, that has the opposite effect of actually really putting people off. So be professional, be calm, be warm and open, but don't come across as too needy, and remember to smile. Not that I'm saying that you should grin like a Cheshire cat for the whole interview, but remember to smile, and it will help to relax you as well. Take your time when answering questions, and particularly if you're throwing a fastball, and you might want to stall for a bit by just saying, oh, well, that's an interesting question. But don't take too long, because you don't want any sort of long, embarrassing silences. Don't rush your answers. I know some people, and I can do this, is if they're nervous, they have a tendency to gabble, but don't do that, so try and remember to breathe and keep calm, and keep your answers succinct and to the point. Don't waffle. And again, sometimes when people are nervous, they answer the question and then they think, oh, I better add some more, so they sort of waffle on for a bit longer. In terms of pitching yourself, show that you've done your research and that you understand the requirements of the job, and give clear examples of how you meet these requirements. Now, you can do that preparation beforehand, because you can look at the job description and the person specification and have some answers up your sleeve that you prepared beforehand. Also show the interviewer that you understand the needs and the challenges of the organisation. And again, it's about what you can bring to the role, rather than telling the interviewer what it is you want from the role. And final thing on this side is be positive and upbeat, and don't moan about your previous employer. So even if you've got some gripes about your previous employer, keep those to yourself, because you never know, one of the interviewers might have a friend who works in that organisation, whether it's the military or another organisation you've worked for. So yeah, keep that to yourself.
So here's an interesting thought, Fiona. If you're being interviewed virtually by a panel of 2 or more people, how do you make eye contact? If one person asks, how do you make eye contact with that person?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that's more difficult, because I think you just have to do as I'm doing now, really, and just face the camera. So it's more difficult maybe then to gain rapport with the person or the people who are interviewing you, because you don't have that eye contact. So I'd say just, face the camera, don't keep looking away. But yeah, don't sort of try and maybe move your head so that you think you're looking at everybody. But that is quite a tricky one.
Good. So you've got through the interview. The panel says to you, do you have any questions? How do you go about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's common practice that you will be allowed to ask questions at the end of an interview. You should be given a little bit of time. And I would say always make use of this. So always have 1 or 2 questions that you are going to ask, and you can prepare in advance for this, because this is another opportunity for you to show that you understand the organisation and that you've done your research about it, and the strategy going forward. So your question should be based around your desire to understand the organisation better and where it is going. So you could ask questions maybe around future projects that you've read about in the press or on the website. And also you might want to ask how your role is going to fit in with any of the future projects or innovation within the company. And a big no-no, though, is do not ask questions about pay and benefits at this stage. So you don't want to be saying to your interviewer, and how many days holiday do I get? This would only come at a later stage if you were off the job, and then you can start talking about those things.
Thanks, Fiona. How should I follow up then?
Okay. Again, it's common practice that at the end of an interview, you would be told when you're likely to hear, and that's going to depend whether you're the first in a number of interviewees or what's going on, but it would be polite for you to be told, well, you will hear within 2 days or within a week, and that's okay. If you're not told that, then it's okay to ask. You could just say, oh, and when will I hear the result of this interview? Also, I think it's polite, and it's probably in the military psyche to do it anyway, is after the interview write an email just to say thank you, that you enjoyed talking to the interviewers, and thanking them for their time. What I would say is do not be too impatient, but if you do not hear within the stated time, then email to ask when you're likely to hear the result. I mean, there may have been some delay, or actually sometimes it could be because you're second on the list and they're waiting to hear whether the first person has accepted the job before they tell anybody else. So just be aware that it may take a little time. But first of all, if you haven't heard, email, and then you could follow up with a phone call, a polite phone call if necessary. The other thing is, if you are unsuccessful, and the chances are it would, well, I do know a client who did this, who only went for one interview and got the job, but the probability of that is not high. So, if you are unsuccessful, thank the interviewer for and the organisation for letting you know, and also ask for feedback. That's really, really important to ask for feedback. Now, it may be that you're just told, well, there was somebody else whose skills and experience matched the job more closely, and there's not a lot you can do about that. Or you might be told, well, we felt the other person was stronger in commercial awareness or commercial acumen, and you can think, well, can I address that in any way? But also the other thing is leave on good terms with the organisation and the interviewer, because you never know, you might be considered for another role. So you could say in your follow-up email, thank you, you're disappointed, but you would like to be considered for another role in the organisation if it comes up. But if you are unsuccessful, don't take it personally. It just happens, and it could be that they already had somebody lined up internally for the role and they were going through the motions of interviewing you. So I would say, and it might be hard, but stay positive, because your perseverance will pay off.
I think this having somebody within the organisation who they've already earmarked for the job, and as you say, going through the motions, is relatively common in public service roles. Is that correct?
I think with public service roles, in fact, they have to advertise the job, but yet generally there is somebody lined up. Or I mean, for example, the NHS, although the NHS have recruited a lot of military people over the last year, they traditionally have always preferred to recruit from within.
Internally, yes.
Yeah.
That's lovely, Fiona. Thank you so much. So do you have any final words of advice?
Yeah, I do, but actually, can I just pick up, somebody has asked a question, can I just pick that up?
Yes.
Yeah, and I didn't pick it up until just now, because it really applies to something that we talked about earlier. And Melville has asked, can you please expand on a neutral background for virtual interviews? Is a blurred background better than a generic scene or design? Well, I don't mind a blurred background, because if you're like, the only place you can do the interview is in your kitchen, you might decide that you just want to blur that background, and that's okay. I would, if I was going for a generic scene or design, I would just go for something really, really, really neutral. I remember I had an embarrassing time with Zoom. I'd been doing a Zoom family call over Christmas, and I changed my background, and I had the Northern Lights in my background. And then I had a client consultation, I think after Christmas, and I'd forgotten that I'd got this background on, and so I had Northern Lights flashing out of my head, and that didn't really look very professional. And at the time I couldn't change the background, so I would say set your background up beforehand and just, you know, play around with it. Try a neutral background or try to blur and see what's better. So if anybody else has got questions, we can take those now. But just on the final messages, I really can't hammer this home enough, but try to see things from your employer's perspective and understand what they want to know about you and how you will help them. Learn how to pitch yourself, and if necessary, practice. You know, have a practice at home, either to yourself, into your video camera, or with a friend or other half or whatever. And remember to smile. It will relax you, and it just makes the thing so much better. Prepare questions in advance. Keep them focused on the organisation, and always follow up, even if you are not successful, and stay positive. And you know, the other thing I was saying, and I know you're going to touch on this about how we can help you further, Clive, but I would say, you know, if you feel that you're getting interviews but you're just not getting anywhere, then come back and talk to Lisa Jones, my colleague, or me, and we can maybe sort of do a little bit of interview practice with you.
I'd add one more thing to that list, if I may, Fiona, and that is, when you are being interviewed, just be yourself, and you'll find you're much more relaxed, and the more relaxed you are, the more likely you are to be successful. Yeah, I think that is a really good point. And then finally, just to pick up, there's another question that Al has made, and what he said is, for virtual interviews, there is the luxury of having your questions and notes surrounding the camera out of sight and the interview while still maintaining eye contact. Work for me. I think that's fine, but you don't want to be constantly looking away from the camera. It goes back to your point about the eye contact. And be careful of shuffling papers when you're not on mute. So Fiona, that's some wonderful advice. Thank you very much indeed. I just would like to go to the next slide, where to get further advice. One of the things we're very keen for those of you who are attending today who haven't already done so is to register with the OA. If you register with the OA, then it gives you access to career consultations with Fiona or Fiona's colleagues, an opportunity to have your CV or your LinkedIn review, and advice on job applications. It will give you access to a targeted jobs board. That's a jobs board where employers are looking for people with military backgrounds and military skills. It'll give you access to a network contact list. That is a list of ex-serving officers who have preceded you, have done their transition from the military into the commercial world, but are offering to give something back and are there for you if you wish to seek advice and guidance from them. There's invitations to our regular events, and the slide after this, I'll show you a couple of events, and which are posted on our website. And very importantly, it'll give you access to a bi-weekly newsletter. On Wednesday, we issue a newsletter with current job opportunities, and on Friday we issue a newsletter with a list of events. So if you haven't already done so, can I encourage you to register with us? It's simple and easy to do through the website, doesn't cost you anything. And when you've registered, then book a career consultation. You can book a career consultation whether you're thinking of leaving, whether you're in your transition, whether you've already left, or even if you left 5 or 10 years ago. You will still be eligible for a consultation with one of our career consultants. So Thank you all very much indeed for joining us today. Really appreciate you sparing us some of your lunchtime to join us. If you've got any questions, I know there's a couple have come up on the Q&A function. If you've got any further questions, please use our website, client.admin@officesassociation.org.uk, and we'll endeavour to get back to you within 24 or 48 hours. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And my special thanks to Fiona. Fiona, thank you so much for
Thank you so much. Just actually
advice.
one final point, because you triggered something in my mind, is that you mentioned LinkedIn, and another thing, when you're doing your research before your interview, then it's also worth looking up, if you know who's going to be interviewing you, then look them up on LinkedIn. And Gavin, I'll answer your question. I'll answer the questions separately. I'll get back to you. So thank you very much.
I'm just looking through the other questions. So you'll deal with Gavin.
Well, I could answer them now if there's time, or if you want me to go.
I think shall we deal with Gavin's one now, because I think we're still just in time.
In fact, this Gavin one is quite a good one, because I think other people may have this as well. So Gavin says, I've got an informal interview tomorrow, a virtual interview, struggling to know how smart to dress. Full suit and tie seems inappropriate. Any thoughts? Well, my view is that even if it's an informal discussion, treat it formally. I mean, you may not want to sit full suit and tie, but I would say, smart shirt, or it could be open neck shirt. You might even want to put a casual jacket on. It's probably going to be warm tomorrow, so not necessary. You might just want to put shirt and tie, but look smart, look the point, not just as if you've come in from taking the dog out for a walk. So good luck, Gavin. Yeah, that's it then. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Fiona. So everybody, thank you very much for joining us today. Fiona, thank you so much for your excellent advice. Paula, thank you very much for support in the background. And I wish you all a very good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Good luck.